Welcome to another episode of the Hope Strategy Podcast. I am Corey Blake, and I'm here with Josh Dimley as always. Josh, how are you doing today?
Fantastic.
Good. I'm happy to hear it. So today was a really great conversation with Shyamala Prayaga. And I'm going to read her bio, but then I'm going to give a lot more context on, we always do this anyway, but on the conversation itself, because I think we went down some pretty funny and cool rabbit holes with her that were really eye-opening. So Shyamala is the founder of the Digital Assistant Academy. That's her own company. She full-time is the product owner for the Digital Assistant program at Ford Motor Company. They're basically like their autonomous cars and using AI to build amazing things, which was awesome to talk about there towards the end.
We're not talking about like your executive assistant who works with you digitally. We're talking about Alexa and Siri and all that stuff.
Built into your autonomous vehicle. Yep. At Ford. She lives in Michigan. She's a self-described evangelist for UX and voice technology, and she recognizes the societal and cultural benefit of the voice tech evolution. Shyamala possesses the insight and knowledge that comes with experience and leadership from technical development and design roles. Her design and research work is presented nationally and internationally to general and field-specific audiences. She has more than 18 years of experience designing for mobile, web, desktop, and smart TV interfaces. In addition, Shyamala has more than 6 years of experience designing voice interfaces for connected home experience, automotive, and wearables. She is a tech guru who's obviously incredibly smart, who has built a very successful career in automation, voice automation specifically. And now she's, again, the head of that project at Ford. We talked about that towards the end of the conversation and started getting into her professional life. But man, she's born and raised in India and moved to the US later in life after starting a family and stuff. And we talked more about her upbringing and some of the experiences that she had. She wrote a book released in January of this year called Close Calls, My Life of Unseen Miracles, which is kind of a memoir a little bit of her upbringing and some of the miracles that she's seen in her life. So we had a really cool personal discussion about what it's like to grow up in India, some miracles as she put them. And she also explained what that means to her, what a miracle is to her. And that was fascinating. We talked about her from a cultural standpoint, her arranged marriage and what that process was like.
That was fascinating.
I know it was. And I think she thought it was kind of funny that I kept asking these questions because I was like, I don't think I've ever talked to somebody that is in an arranged marriage. And this is fascinating. It was awesome. Which was cool. And then we got into a lot of other cool personal experience she had in building a family, in fighting cancer and beating it. And also we talked about, God has come up multiple times on this podcast, but as I've talked to more and more people, I understand that God means something different for everybody. And so I asked her in the interview what that meant, because she had referred to God multiple times, but she also said like God and the universe. Anyways, it was fascinating to hear what that means to her. So you have to listen to kind of understand what that is. And I think that's kind of a cool question. One of the podcasts I really like out there asks people, it's a comedic kind of podcast run by a comedian, but at the end of the episode, he always asks people what their belief in God is, because he's fascinated with understanding. So it was came to me to ask that question. I thought it was interesting to hear her perspective on that after having said she's seen so many miracles in her life and obviously has lived a very full life.
And we went a little bit longer on this podcast than other episodes, but it was because there were these two parts to her. There was her life experiences, and then there was all this fascinating professional stuff, because talk about being in the right place at the right time. All her experience with AI and voice integration type stuff. And right now we're seeing all of this come to life with the Google Home or Google Assistant and Siri and Alexa, and it being built into all these cars and everything. And she's really at that hotspot of this voice activated technology right now. So we asked a bunch of questions about that as well.
Yeah. Starting in India, working for AOL back in the day, and then Amazon, and then moving over here and working for Amazon, and super cool. She's a very, very smart individual with a lot of really great stories. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that you do too. Please enjoy the Hope Strategy Podcast with this week's guest, Shyamala Prayaga.
Something is happening in our world.
Time is very precious. I'm going to show you how great I am.
Hope in the face of difficulty.
More than machinery, we need humanity.
Hope in the face of uncertainty.
I'm better now than I was. I'm experienced now.
Changing the world can happen anywhere, and anyone can do it.
The audacity of hope.
This is the Hope Strategy Podcast with Corey Blake and Josh Steinley. We're really excited to talk to you. Typically where we want to start, Shyamala, is understanding where you're coming from, like your background, where you grew up. And a lot of times with our guests, it's, I grew up in the US, here. I'm really excited to learn more about your upbringing because you've gone on to be so successful as an entrepreneur. You've fought some very personal and difficult battles in your life that you've overcome. You currently are working as the product owner for the digital assistant. I mean, that's a big deal, right? And so, I mean, you've like Josh said, this journey is one that I'm so excited to learn more about. But let's start at the foundation. What was it like for you growing up in India? What was your upbringing like?
I come from a very, very small town in India called Jabalpur. It's in the northern part of India. And I think growing up, the population was like 70,000. That's it. Not a lot. I'm one of the 3 siblings. My dad had a transferable job and he was the earning member of the family. Mom was always a housemaker, taking care of us. So growing up, most of the time, like my dad, I would see him only on weekends because of his job, he would not be available with us. So I never had a father figure with me during my growing years, like to lean on to. So that's how my childhood was pretty much. Grew up, studied in a missionary school called St. Joseph's Convent. So that's how, like my journey started. I started learning more about Christianity there, being from the missionary. And I'm Hindu by religion. And, like my family is very spiritual. So they kept taking me to these spiritual events, anything. So growing up, my mom always taught me, like giving back is the best way to receive good in your life. So that's how, like my teachings were throughout the life. So from there, after my education, I was struggling because the biggest thing for me, I always, when I used to see those small places around me, like small huts or, like homeless people and all those things, it used to trigger something inside me. And I used to feel like, one day, and I come from a very middle class family, like some days we would not be able to afford certain things. So it was those kind of hard moments for us as well. So growing up, when I used to see those things, something used to trigger me and I used to say like one day, like I want to build everything from the scratch, including spoons for my house and building my own house and my own everything. That was the motivation factor for me to really work hard and have the financial independence, which I have today.
It's funny because a town of 70,000, that's pretty small, but I feel like US standard, it's not that small. I'm guessing in India, that's a very small town. There's a lot more people in India than there are here, right? So,
yeah. When you said small town, I was thinking like
4,000 or
5,000 people maybe, because the city I grew up in, which is outside of Los Angeles, is 50,000 people. And I wouldn't call it a small town, but when you're in a country with over a billion people, then I guess 70,000 is pretty tiny, relatively speaking.
Definitely. And it's still, that town is still, I would not say 100% developed. It's still developing. So you can imagine,
Yeah.
But the best thing about Jabalpur has been the education system, and most of the people there come from immigrants, I would say, within India, people from different cities and different states are there. So they always have this, connection, like I want to have my connections with the root. So we used to have these, local communities of the South Indian community or the North Indian. That's how, India is divided by different things.
Would you say that that's pretty common in India for a middle-class family to have the father or mother kind of off working most of the week and putting in really long hours? And then do you typically have a parent at home helping raise the family, or were you guys kind of an exception there? What's kind of, if you had to identify like kind of the standard, what would it be?
Yeah. So it's not a standard. I wouldn't say it's a standard. My dad was in a government job. Basically coming from the small town, the school and the education system was really nice. And my mom always wanted us to have the best education no matter what, so that, we can be independent. And we were 3 sisters. And that's a big deal in India. Like, oh, you don't have a brother. And, the male-female, thing is always there. So my mom was like, although I have 3 sisters, I want them to have independence in their life so that they can make their own decisions. Because of that, when my dad got transferred, my mom was like, no, I don't want to ruin their school or any things because they are in a really good school. We used to study in private schools. That's the decision my family made and the sacrifice my family made because, they wanted us to have a better education. No, so it's not very common, I would say, with others. I would not see this as a pattern with most of the families, especially people who are in defense, army or navy, family moves with them, but they have a different kind of education system. Like they have central schools or those kind of schools, which, like allow for transferable jobs. India is run by private schools. And most of the private schools, they have admission criteria. You cannot just get into any of those. So that's why my mom never wanted us to lose the seat in the school.
Yeah, once you were in, you didn't want to lose that, right? So as a kid growing up, was it kind of always something you knew that eventually if I want to build something from the ground up, did you think I want to do that in the United States? Or did you think I'm going to do that here in India? Or did you not think that far ahead at that point?
I never thought about United States. I wanted to just have financial independence and I was just want to, I want to have a career. Growing up, there was no one actually who I can say was my, role model because, most of the women I would say were housewives, taking care of the family and homemakers. So I never found anyone, but my aunt was there, my dad's sister in India, and she was the only woman I know who was working back in those days. When I used to see her financial independence and then I used to see how people look up to her, she was like a figure by itself. Like people used to respect her. That was what used to inspire me. Like, okay, I want to do something, but I never thought that I would come to United States one day. I would start a company here or I would do any of the things I'm doing now.
That's a good window into kind of what it was like growing up. I appreciate that. I'm interested to now hear that transition. So you're going through school and you're studying, and at what point did you come to United States? What was that transition like? And was it for work? Was it for education? Or what was it that brought you to the US? Because you're in Michigan, right? Is that where you're based?
I'm in Michigan, yeah.
Okay. Is it starting to get pretty cold?
It is very and coming from India, this climate
I was going to say a little different than when you grew up.
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting thing. After marriage, I got married when I was like 24-ish. Yeah. So after marriage, I got a lot of opportunities. By then, I already had, some brand name and some, credibility in the industry. I was getting a lot of opportunities to come to the United States, but then my husband was not ready. And he was like, I would never leave my country, and my family. He was not completely ready to do that. So I kept ignoring all the opportunities which was coming to me from the United States. Then one day I remember, my son was 2. And that's when randomly my husband said, like, you know what, it's time for us to move to United States. I'm ready now. And I was working with Amazon back then in India. I said, are you sure you want to move? And he was like, yeah. I'm really confident this time. And I'm like, do you understand there will be a lot of sacrifices and there will be a lot of struggles and all of those? He's like, yeah, I want my son to have an international exposure. I don't know why it came to his mind, but he was the one who actually, pushed me. And I was like, stick to your words. And the day he told me, within 1 month, we moved to United States. So it was that way. The day he spoke to me, the next day I spoke to my manager, and my manager was, you know what, I don't know if that is possible right now because we don't have any opportunity here in the United States, but let me check. And that day evening, he sends a mail and he's like, okay, we are bringing you here. I'm like, that's great.
Jeez, what a turn of events. That's incredible. And so within 1 month of your husband saying, finally, let's move, you were on a plane moving to the States.
Yeah.
And was that to the West Coast then? Did you move?
Yeah, Seattle.
Okay.
I moved to Seattle. So was in Seattle for some time. Moved to Michigan 3 years back.
In the research that I've done, there's 2 sides to your story. Well, there's a lot of sides to your story, but a couple of different things that are really fascinating to me. One is the professional side, right? You're an industry leader in, is it voice recognition, what would you call it? What's the industry called? Because I heard it referenced a couple different ways.
It's called voice assistant. Voice recognition is one of the enablers for the voice assistant.
So voice assistant technologies or something, right? So that's kind of, and again, you're right now the product owner for the digital assistant at Ford, which is amazing. So I'm really interested in your expertise and knowledge as an expert on that. But I'm also interested in, you wrote a book a number of years back called Close Calls, My Life of Unseen Miracles. And you've got this amazing story, and I'm excited to read the book. I haven't yet read the book, but I'm excited to read more about this and kind of get the in-depth. But I'd love to hear some of these stories that you, and again, when we're talking about hope, especially, right? Like it sounds like you've had, I mean, the title of the book is Close Calls, My Life of Unseen Miracles. I guess the first question is, what do you define as a miracle? In order to put that name in the title of a book and having lived this life of miracles, how do you define a miracle in that sense?
That's a very interesting question. So see, for me, miracle is when you're not expecting something or you feel like, all the doors are closed and there is no light in my life anymore. And all of a sudden something out of the blue just pops out and then tables turn for you. That's how I define miracles. And a lot happened with me in my life, I would say. And that was the motivation of writing the book, including cancer, job losses, which I've suffered with minimal damage. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So walk us through that. A lot of people go through an obstacle, a trial, and it knocks them down and they get, beat up for a little while. And the last thing on their mind is, I'm going to come out of this with an optimistic abundance mentality and write a book about it and share my story. I mean, the percentage of that happening is very small. Can you walk us through some of those miracles that you saw, some of those, what you define as miracles, some of those experiences that you had and how you were able to pull through and maybe, how it kind of led you to writing the book?
Definitely. So the first miracle which happened in my life was when I was in 5th grade.
Way back.
Way back. And I still remember 5th grade was a board exam for us, which is like, like state exams. Otherwise, there's a different kind of education system in India. So it was a late start of the day. And usually, we used to go in school bus. I got up around 6 o'clock. And then my mom was like, okay, can you go to the store nearby and get some bread? Unlike here where we have dedicated stores in the United States, like you have different shopping areas and different, like residential areas. It's not the same in India. So in India, it's like, like within the residential area, you would find one shopping, like shop, mom or pop shop kind of thing. So I was like, yeah, why not? So there were 2 routes to go to that shop. One was a shortcut, which would take me, like shorter time. And the other was a little longer. And, usually during that time of the day, many people would prefer taking the longer route. But I chose the shortcut because, I was like, I'll quickly go run and get the bread. And so going back was no problem at all. I got the bread. And when I was coming back, my hands were really, like busy because I had bread and, other things my mom asked me to bring. All of a sudden, someone came from the backside and, just held my mouth like this, and this guy held me so tightly, like he was attempting to kidnap me and, take me towards the bushes from that shortcut road. And no one can see actually on that shortcut road. Was
this in a city? Were you in like a city environment? Was there a lot of people around or were you kind of on a...
No, it's so very deserted. The shortcut road, which I'm talking about is a road. It's not like many people are there. Like they are so far apart. The houses are so far apart that even if you yell, no one can notice.
Okay.
So that's how it was. So this guy comes and he, just
covers your mouth. So you can't see
my mouth. And I was not able to even see who this person is. And I was in 5th grade, but this guy was really powerful. He was trying to push me. And, the only thing I said at that moment, because I had no power to, defend him or fight him. I was like, God, I surrender to you. That's it. And this guy was not able to move me even an inch. I was just standing still like a tree. He was trying his best, but he was not able to move. And I was not very powerful. It was very surprising for me. And within seconds, in that deserted road, there were a group of people coming with their family or, someone in a road which you would not expect many people to be. There was a lot of people coming towards me. And all of a sudden, when he saw he's not able to move me any further, and there are so many people, he just left me and ran from there. Imagine, what could have happened that day if, those people wouldn't have come.
What was the aftermath of that? I mean, that's a traumatic experience. I'm guessing there's some PTSD involved the next time your mom asked you to go get some bread. I mean, did you run home and talk to your parents about that or tell your mom about that?
Oh my God, I was terrified.
I bet.
I got so scared. I just ran and I was like, help, help, help. And after that, I was yelling, help, help, help. And I ran towards my house, and then everyone started coming. They were like, what happened, Shyamala? And I'm like, okay, someone attempted to kidnap me. And, I started telling the story. I was crying and I came home. I was shivering, and my mom was like, okay, you're going anywhere. And my mom was overprotective because my dad was traveling. So there was no one else. So my mom got very scared. After that, everyone tried consoling me like, okay, everything will be fine. Don't worry. But I was in that trauma for a very long time where I would not attempt to go out alone at all. But then gradually, one day I realized like, this is not how I want to live, all my life. And I need to take the step, have that guts to fight back whatever is there. And then I just one day decided like, okay, no matter what, I'll attempt it one more time. And then next time I'll be more vigilant, what I do or how I go, when I go and all of those things. So I just started being a little more careful, but I did not stop going to the store again or buying things. But yeah, it was there for a while, a couple of months, I would say, before I came out of that trauma.
I mean, was that something that you had heard of growing up where you grew up? Or do you think that, did kids get kidnapped often? Was that something you had to look out for? Or was that something that was just completely off your radar? And it just, who knows who that person was and where they were from and why they were doing that?
It was not very common. Like kids get kidnapped everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
Everywhere. So, it's not unique to a specific place. But then, like in India, raping is also a very big problem. So my mom always, made us aware of those things. Like you have to be careful, you have to be vigilant and all. 5th grade, I'm very naive, very innocent,
yeah.
And come from small town, I was not even very smart, I would say, as compared to, the bigger town, bigger city girls. So for me, it was really, okay, I used to play with my friends and that was my life, my school, that's it. So I never knew about any of those things. And I don't think, that was very common in that area. But I don't know why. There was a couple of years where similar kind of incidences started happening. After mine, I started hearing more of people getting kidnapped from these areas and missing and things like that.
What a traumatic experience for a 12 or 13-year-old, right? I'm guessing you were 11, 12, 13. So I just wondered, because you hear so much, especially now lately, so much about like child trafficking and these experiences that people have just walking down the street. And, anyways, that's incredible. So I had heard you mention in one of the interviews that I listened to that even starting a family or having kids for you was a miracle. And then obviously you eventually got diagnosed with cancer, and I don't think the odds were very good. And somehow, some way you were able to fight past that and work. Do you want to give us a couple of other of those stories? I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, definitely. I can actually talk about my son.
So how old is your son now?
He's 9.
Right? Oh, wow. Hey, I've got a 9-year-old too.
Oh,
9-year-old boy.
9-year-old boy. So this is the best age, I would say. He's growing into a very smarter, hard worker, I would say. So I got married very early, like I mentioned, like 24. I never wanted to marry in first place, because independence and, having a career was always in my mind. And, people wanted, men especially wanted women to be a housewife.
Is that mentality changing, do you see, in India? There's a huge push, and there has been obviously, for women's rights and for equal pay and all these things, which obviously we're 100% behind, right? Like, is that different? Do you still feel like it's a little behind in India, or is that something that you're seeing continuing to evolve and change with
it has
more women
changed.
in the workplace?
It has changed drastically.
Good.
So we're now both, and again, depends on your upbringing, depends on where you're coming from, the location.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like small villages, small towns, not as much. But then, yes, to the extent where I have seen like my entire batch or, my classmates, they are all, career oriented.
Oh, cool.
Doing something on their own. Either it is business or it is working in big tech companies. Some of them are doctors. So yes, it is changing to the extent where, women are not confined to just being, a housewife nowadays. That being said, for me in the first place, career was always my first preference. My husband was the 7th match I saw. It was a marriage, in India, it's like, you date someone and then, you decide if you're compatible and then marry. It's more like, 1 hour meeting with a guy, you will decide your entire life.
And your parents organized this based off of another family that they knew that they liked. They said, we like this family. They've got a son. Shyamala, go and sit down and meet with them. And so was it literally an hour of
It was an hour. It was an hour. So my husband
and you had to make the decision within that hour or with that hour.
With that hours, not within that hour, but like you can think about action you had and think about, okay, is this person compatible for me or not?
Wow. It is the most extreme version of speed dating.
You bet.
Yeah. I mean, my parents dated for 6 years before they got married. So it's kind of the extreme opposite of that.
So he was the seventh person that your parents had presented to you as a potential husband.
Match. The reason why I rejected most of the matches or they rejected me was I was way too ambitious for them.
Okay.
Some of them were like, they wanted a housewife and I was like, no, sorry, thank you. Like my first criteria.
So can I ask another question on this? Because I think this whole, we've all heard of arranged marriage, right? That's something that we're well aware that culturally that's something that's done, but I have some questions. So for the parents in that situation, what is their process for identifying a potential match? Is it a spiritual process for them? Is it a logistical process? Is it, you know what I mean? Or is it just simply based on, I like the parents, they're good friends of ours. They've got a son. I mean, what is that? What is the process like for a parent that's a big pressure for them too, to say, assuming they're good parents to say, we've got this person that we think you should marry, that's a big task.
A lot of things. It's not spiritual only. It's a lot of things. Logistics as well gets into there. It's not always like, I know this family, so, like you should marry, she's my, this guy is from my friend's son or something. It's not always like that. We have marriage bureaus. Usually what happens is, you would have a file like we do for resumes and jobs. There's a marriage bureau where they will have all of your profile. Then you decide like, okay, I have these criterias and then match up that if you have a potential match. But in my case, I did not even put my profile in a marriage bureau. It was through contacts and contacts. One of the contacts said, hey, you know what, actually, my cousin's son or something along those lines. Interestingly, with my husband, he's a miracle in my life as well. With my husband, my uncle, my mom's brother and his uncle, his mom's brother, they used to work in the same company and they hardly knew each other. So one day, when they were going through this shuttle, one of them was standing. So, the other offered their seat and they were like, okay, you are loaded with a lot of things. So why don't you sit? And, that offering of the seat turned into a conversation and they were like, how are you? And who are you? And, all those things. And where are you from? And within the 30 minutes of commute they had potential bride and groom or matches. Like, oh, I have, my sister's daughter and my sister's son. So that's how it was. And then the biodata was shared, they shared the profile and with their family.
So do you sit down with your parents and go through the profile, or do they look at it first before they show it to you, or what's that like? Sorry, I'm asking so many granular details, but I think this is a fascinating thing that not too many people are familiar with.
No, depends. I don't know about others, but in my case, my family first looked through the profile, and my husband was used to work he was a banker, so used to work for a big bank in India. So that's what they looked at, and the salary. And then they looked at the family and, the religion and all of those things, and everything kind of matched. So they were like, okay, this is a good match. And it comes with like a resume, a one pager. And then,
Does it come with a headshot?
It's so funny, yeah. They sent me his picture and, one pager. And similarly, my biodata in one page with my photo was sent to their family. My mom kept telling me like, hey, there's a potential match and you should see. And I was like, already I've seen 6 people and I'm like frustrated now. I don't want to go through this process again. You have to dress up. And I'm one of those persons who don't like to dress up. I don't like to dress up for any occasion. I am who I am. That's how, my mindset has been. But especially for all the 6 matches, my mom would ask me to wear the traditional sari and do all makeup and all that stuff. And I was super frustrated. Why are you showcasing me as a display piece in front of someone else? That's how frustrated I used to be. I did not even look at his profile. And my mom kept asking me, like, look at it. I was like, okay, I saw the picture. I'm like, whatever. I don't care. That's it. I did not even look at the profile or anything. I hardly knew his name. And it's funny. So then finally, like after back and forth, both the parents spoke and they were like, they decided a place where we would meet. Again, it was a very frustrating point for me because I come from Jabalpur and then they were in Hyderabad and they asked us to come to Hyderabad. And I was like, why can't they travel to us if I be traveling to their city? And I was super frustrated.
I like it.
My mom was like, okay. And then, I told her, this is the last time I'm going, but after that I would not. So she agreed. But then I had terms and conditions in place. I was like, I will not dress up. I will be who I am and blah, blah, blah. I told all the different criterias, which were frustrating me from the previous 6 experiences. And my mom agreed. So I went. I was like how I am right now. No, nothing, no makeup, nothing, like I was wearing sari, but it was, not the best, just the simple one. This person will see me like this whole of my life, not with makeup. So if he likes me the way I am, then I know that he's the right person for me. That's it. And it was funny. Then, he comes and then, the family is having a discussion and they were like, okay, why don't you guys go and talk to each other, and they sent us to in a separate room. And I was sitting like this, like one leg over the other and folding my legs like this. And my husband was standing.
You were just showing all the nonverbal cues of I am not interested.
Not interested. And my husband was standing and he was waiting for me to say, please have a seat.
And you were thinking, finally, you want to sit down, you know how to sit down. I don't need to tell you to sit.
Yeah. So anyways, so after that, I was like, yes, as if I felt like I'm taking an interview this time more than a match. So anyways, he sat and I was like, if you don't mind, can you tell me your name? And he was at shock because he did about me and my background and compatibility and everything. And I was blank, having no knowledge about him or, what he does. So anyways, he told me his name. And then, the first thing he said was, see, I have a couple of criterias, what I'm looking for in my potential wife. And the first thing is, I want a wife, who's professional or is interested in having a career. I was like, check mark.
Yeah, boom.
Because you are the first one who said that.
He might just be a really good salesman and he knew on your resume that that's what you were looking for.
Yeah, kind of. So that was his first, criteria. And, that have a conversation with him further. And we kind of spoke. And then he was like, yeah, I'm very, passionate about my career and I want to have my career. I don't want any kind of sacrifices in my life, especially when it comes to my career. And he was like, I'm ready to support my wife in whatever way it is, when it comes to her career. That's what he told me. And he sticks to that.
Awesome.
He did a very good sales pitch. And why I call him a miracle is, because who I am today, what I am today is because of, all the support he has given me. When we decided to come to United States, he was an assistant manager with Thomson Reuters. But because we decided to come here and he saw more potential in my skill sets, he sacrificed his career for mine and we moved here. And very few people would do that, being a house husband while your wife is earning. Made ego.
Yeah, especially when that's not against, but it's just so contrary to a lot of the cultural norms that you were used to, right? That's a big shift. That's awesome. Wow. I love that story. I was envisioning the whole thing as it went down. I think I got a pretty good idea. That's awesome.
I'm kind of liking this arranged marriage stuff. I'm like, I want to do this with my kids. Like, what right do they have to choose?
I'm thinking with my two daughters, I'm like, I think I can make a better decision than they can at like 20 something. Maybe they're on to something. Do you just have the one son?
Yeah, I just have one son.
Okay.
Yeah, anyways, we derailed a lot, but my husband was one of the miracles in my life. So then finally we decided we'll have kids, later at a later stage, 2 or 3 years after marriage, once we are settled. So after that, what happened was, 3 years passed, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. We started having this craving for now is the time to have kids because everything was there in life. We were settled in our life. We had our own house and everything. And there was no purpose in life. what are we doing and who are we doing all this for? So that's what started, creating the void in our life. Every time, I used to feel like I'm pregnant, the report used to come negative. So I was like, I don't know what's happening. And then, went through a lot of, treatment and all, and realized there were some medical issues kind of causing all of the infertility. So I had some surgeries and all. So within a month, not even month, 2 weeks after my surgery, I still remember I was cleaning the bathrooms, and in India, it's a different thing. You would put acid and you would, rub and clean and do all those things. So, I was cleaning the bathroom and I was like, should I just do a test today and see, because I just missed a couple of days of my periods. I take this kit and I do the testing, and there was a very, very thin line in that kit. And we got very hopeful. My husband and I were like, okay, am I pregnant? And he was like, looks like, because it never came like this anytime. Yeah. So we immediately rushed to the hospital, and he was like, why were you doing all of these things? You were inhaling acid. And I'm like, don't worry. It's so early. We went to the hospital, and then, I told the doctor, I took the kit with me and I was like, look at this. And I feel like I'm pregnant. So the doctor was like, okay, let's do the test and see. And she took her kit out, and then, they did the pregnancy test, negative. Like, you know what? Actually, you're not pregnant. This kit is wrong. I was like, no, I was persistent. I was like, I think I am pregnant. Can you please test it again? So she tried another kit, and then, another kit also, it came negative. And she's like, Shyamala, you are going crazy because you want kids. And she's like a family doctor, very close. So, she would talk just like this. And I was like, no, I feel I am pregnant. Can you please check? And she's like, 2 of my kids are not, showing any sign of pregnancy. How can I trust? And I'm like, okay. So she tried third time also it came negative. She's like, 3, that's it, done. Nothing else, throw your kid. Where did you get it from? I said, my sister-in-law got it from USA. These US kids don't work. That was her words. And I was like, standing there persistent. I was like, I don't care how many, kids you bring and you test and it comes negative. I'm positive I'm pregnant. Can you do something else for me? So she was like, okay, let's do the urine test, blood test or some test, something like that. So she got the test, she sent me for the blood test and all. And then evening the reports comes, and she's like, okay, come in the evening and we'll look at it. Okay. And she was 100% confident with all her 3 kits. Okay, to prove that my kit was wrong. In the evening, okay, and then she's sitting like this, in my report, very keenly, okay, and then I go, and she's like, I am still not sure why my kit did not show the positivity, the pregnancy positive. I'm like, I don't know. Your kit is wrong.
Yeah, this is really just a long commercial for why American kits do work.
It's funny. So she was like, okay, this is it. You are pregnant, but it's a very lean, very faint line or very faint, HCG count, which means that it's a very weak pregnancy. You have to be super careful. And I was like, okay, I will be careful. She told me to be on bed rest, and I was on bed rest. Now, after a couple of weeks, she asked me to come for a heartbeat test. And here I go again for the heartbeat test, and there was no heartbeat. And I was panicking, and the doctor was trying to find the heartbeat everywhere. And she was like, okay, I don't know what's happening. I started panicking. And when I started looking at Google, I started finding all sorts of information, like it could be an empty gestational sac and all sorts of things. It could be a false pregnancy. And I was crying. I'm like, you gave me hope. You just gave me a hope that I may be pregnant. And then, I got pregnant, and now there's no heartbeat at all and all of those things. And I was really, worried with all of these things. And the doctor said, okay, let's not come to a conclusion. Let's give 2 weeks. And then, after 2 weeks, let's see what happens. Sometimes there could be, the growth could be less or something. So let's wait. So 2 weeks, I kept praying, and I just surrendered. Every time, I surrender to God, I definitely see miracles in my life. She said, I don't give a lot of hope or a lot of guarantee that, yes, after 2 weeks, it will be heartbeat. But I want to give 2 weeks to see, what's happening. And I kept praying. I just surrendered to God, and I was chanting mantras and all of those things. And all the time I was just, holding, my tummy, and I was like, okay, everything will be all right. I just kept, praying to God. 2 weeks when I go, there was heartbeat. So, like from the potential of maybe, it was a false pregnancy, I will have to, get it aborted, to, being a baby who's alive was a very difficult, transition for me mentally.
Yeah.
In the whole 9 months, it was like this, lots of ups and downs like these, all of a sudden he would not kick or something would happen. So the whole 9 months was a roller coaster ride for me. Then came the time of delivery, 8th month. And the doctor was, not the right time to have pain. And I was like, but I can't do anything. And the position was coming down. And she was like, but the lungs will not be formed. All the body parts will not be formed. Like if it was 7th month, we could have kept the baby in the incubator and, artificially would have worked. But 8th month is very risky. And, she was trying to push it harder to, move the dates. And she gave me some injections, like shots. But then, it didn't work that long. Somehow she was able to push a week or so. And the moment, I don't know what happened after that, like 8th month was very terrible for me. I was just praying this labor pain should stop because I don't know what to do, if this baby comes out now. And somehow I stopped having this labor pains. And then all of a sudden, 9th month, it just started. And then I again started having pain. And then I went again to the hospital and she was like, yep, we are delivering a baby now. Come on in.
Oh, wow.
So the 8th month was a very difficult period for me. And I don't know how miraculously, the pain stopped and how, you cannot go against nature if the baby has already started dropping and, hardly do anything at that point.
This isn't a spiritual podcast in any way, but obviously we want to always understand where people derive this hope from because it comes from a lot of different places. Do you think that there's a level in some of these stories, kind of one of the trends I'm hearing is just from you, kind of that positive affirmation, that positive outlook, that almost kind of envisioning or thinking, the most positive thing as an outcome. And then you're seeing as a result. This is actually really interesting because this is the second week in a row our guests on the podcast talked about infertility and some of the struggles that they have. This is two back to back here. Do you think there's a kind of that mental side of it, just that positive affirmation process of thinking positively that helps yield results?
Yeah, I 100% believe in that. I mean, it's not just theory. I have seen that in my life. Every time I was positive about things, it turned out really well for me. Positive affirmations or, having that positive attitude has always helped me. Someone told me I attracted cancer in my life, and I'll come to that. But that's when I realized how powerful our mind is and, what and how we attract. If you are positive, you are attracting positivity. If you are negative, you are attracting negativity. If someone is always complaining about their life and complaining about, nothing is good in my life, you are attracting negativity in your life. Whereas someone who has shit going on in their life, still if they are saying okay, everything is perfect, everything is great, you are subconsciously feeding positivity and you are telling the universe that this is how I want my life to be.
Well, that's a bold statement that somebody made to you that you attracted cancer to your life. That's a very strong statement. Hopefully it was from a trusted source, not somebody you didn't.
No. It was from a trusted source. And I believe in them a lot, and that's what made my process change because I was one of those person when I was going through cancer and all of those things, I lost trust in God. I've always been, from a spiritual family, like I mentioned, right? So my mom used to always teach us even a leaf cannot fall from the tree without God's will. That's how she taught us, everything is God's will. From that to, when things started happening wrong in my family, from 2017, there were back-to-back incidences which was happening, my sister was diagnosed cancer first. She's 1 year elder to me. And then the next year it was my dad. And then we lost him this year in January. And after that, it was me. The day my dad passed away, that same day, I was diagnosed with cancer. So when so many things were happening, I was what's good? Why is God doing all of these things? I completely, lost trust in God. I was depressed and, a lot of things were going on in my life right now at that moment.
Did you live here at that time, or were you still home?
I was here.
Oh, okay.
And with all of those things, when this person told me, when she asked me, like, what was going on in your life, and I told her, all of the incidences and all, then she was like, what, you attracted cancer in your life. That's it. What you think is what you materialize.
So she was suggesting that because of the stress and anxiety and focus that you had been putting on your sister and your dad and all of this.
And the negative mindset, like, people were feeding that to me, like, okay, family history and cancer is a family kind of thing, like if someone gets, you have to be careful because she got breast cancer and it has ties to family history. Like, okay, now you are potentially, you may get cancer as well. So that's how people started, like feeding into my mind, and subconsciously that was in my mind somewhere. And I started panicking and I started getting mammogram and everything. Even though I was not 40 at that time, I was, trying to find ways to get all of those things. So obviously, subconsciously, I was feeding like, yes, cancer, cancer, cancer. And that's what happened.
What was your initial reaction though when they said, oh, this is your fault, you attracted this cancer? I mean, what was your initial feeling? What did you say back to them?
I did not say anything. I was like awestruck when they said, because I started reflecting back on, what happened in a couple of years and my actions. And I was like, maybe she's right. Maybe I was too negative. Maybe, I got too, subconsciously I was feeding these things in my mind because I've been a positive person all my life and never, I had any such things.
So you were open-minded enough to consider that. It reminds me, there's a quote from Jack Canfield. He's the author of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And he says, if you want to be successful in life, you need to take 100% responsibility for everything that happens to you.
Yeah.
And that's what you did. And it sounds almost kind of ridiculous, right? To say, well, maybe I did cause my cancer. Maybe I did something. And yet you did that. Do you feel like that was a healthy mindset, even though most people would say that, well, of course not, that's not realistic. But for you, was that part of you taking control of your destiny and saying, well, if it's my fault I got it, then I can do something about it?
That's how I thought about it, I would say. Because when I realized, like you attracted cancer, I was like, when I started reflecting back, I was like, yeah, maybe it's time to start thinking positive. Maybe it's time to start reflecting back and, like whatever has happened now, I have to, rectify those things. And because one more thing happened, my cancer was detected in a very early stage. It was again a miracle because, it was identified as an incidental finding. I had a surgery and, I just went for routine checkup and, in the routine checkup, this came out. So someone also told me at the same time, like angels are watching you. And when they told me this and the other person told me, you are responsible, I was like, there's a very fine line between, like my thought process and, like how God and the universe works. Because yes, what I think is what I'm materializing. And, when I'm thinking negative, God cannot do anything, God cannot erase things and say like, no, I'm doing positive for you.
I'm going to ask a very specific question. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. I'm just kind of curious because as we talk to a lot of different people, God comes up a lot. This idea of God in your mind, what does that mean? Some people refer to this because you just mentioned God and the universe, right? Like sometimes people just say it's a omnipresent influence on our lives, or it's a human or a person or an individual. Again, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but when you think of that and when you speak to that, what does that mean to you?
I am not an atheist, definitely, right? But I'm not one of those person who thinks that God is someone or something, which you can see. I feel like it's part of the universe. Maybe, the universe or the master. It could be, something, my mind talks to, or connects with. It could be that. It is not necessarily, someone, an idol of a god in the temple or a church or any, spiritual places. So for me, God is someone I can connect with, when I'm talking or, I write diary and talk to God every day. It could be anyone, I'm just talking and I connect, in different ways, I would say. I was missing my dad a lot and I just started feeling that I started doing meditations and all of a sudden, I was able to connect to the meditation for such a long time that one whole week my dad came to my dream every day, and which was shocking and surprising. I was like, did I connect too much or what's happening?
Dad, go away. That's enough.
Yeah. So I was a little, terrified, when it happened the third, fourth and fifth day. But then the whole point is, there are, I would not say supernatural powers. I would not say, any such things. But there is something in this universe, that is the beauty of the universe. There's something, there's a power, it could be a master, it could be anything you want to call it. But there is something, someone who, takes care of you always. And that is what I call God.
So it's a connectedness or a connection to something bigger than yourself that has some form of control over outcomes. And you rely on that connection, whether it be through meditation or prayer or mantras, or like you had said before, to help have that mindset or connect to something outside of yourself that brings you happiness, joy, connection. I appreciate you sharing that, because again, we talked to a lot of different people, right? Who we spoke with last week said, I don't believe in God at all, but I've seen a lot of positive things happen in my life. As I've focused on these things and worked hard for these things, and other people may say, no, God is this exact thing for me. And that's what I think of when I think of God. It's different for everybody. So I appreciate that. Man, what great stories. I mean, from the time you were in fifth grade all the way through to building a family and getting to the States and building a career and fighting cancer and all of these things. Let's switch gears a little bit to the professional side. What did you study in college? What's your educational background?
I did my civil engineering, and again, I was a post engineer because in India, again, your parents decide what you want to do, and now things have changed a little bit. But growing up, if you are born, the day your parents will decide either you have to be a doctor or an engineer. These are the two professions in India, people have always cared about. You cannot be an artist. You cannot be anything else. If you are any of those, okay, but yeah, you should be a doctor. So if you come from a doctor's family, a medical family, they would expect you to be a doctor.
So you're considered rebellious if you do anything in the liberal arts or something, if you decide to go that route.
If you decided to do anything more than what you actually want to do. So
my parents wouldn't have been happy with me with my communications degree then if I was in India.
Yeah, no. You know what? People who do arts or commerce in India, they're like, oh, you did arts? Oh,
that's so cute.
That's how it is. Like, okay, why didn't you choose math? How about science? That's how it is. For me, what happened was I was in 10th grade. And then, after 10th grade, you can get into the diploma, engineering diploma, and like the polytechnic. Or after 12th, you can do your graduation. So my mom started pushing me like, okay, look for engineering, see if you are able to get into polytechnic because that is easy route to get into engineering. And I was like, okay, fine. And then I did my entrance exam and I got through it. And I was a first engineer, got into civil engineering, because out of all the subjects, I was a terrible, terrible student growing up. I would not be able to connect with any subject, math, science, social studies, geography. They used to scare me, I would not be able to remember anything. Even now I'm a little scared of math, I would say, So I don't teach my son any math. My husband would do that. I'm like, okay, no, I want to stay away from math even now.
Yeah.
I used to never connect with any of these subjects. And then my mom asked me to do engineering. So when I got my counseling for the entrance exam, there were a couple of options: electronics, electrical, mechanical, and civil. I am a designer by heart and artistic, I would say. Growing up, I always wanted to construct things. So I always wanted to design things. That's how my mind used to work. I looked at all the different options. Civil stood out because, civil engineering is like, I'm building house, I'm designing the end house should be. I'm looking at, like the end to end, like if I have to design the bridge, I'm looking at, those problem solving kind of things. Others were there, but I was not able to connect to other subjects. And again, civil engineering in India, the same mindset, like, people who did not get any of the other branches like electronics, electrical, mechanical or anything, the last branch they choose is civil engineering. Growing up, not many people were civil engineers. So my mom, said, okay, whatever, I just want to see the engineering tag. That's it, right? A certificate. People started questioning me and my choice. Like, why did you choose civil? Civil is so difficult for, girls. You will have to be outdoor all the time and you'll have to, travel and blah, blah, blah. And, you made a wrong choice. People started questioning my choice and all of those things. And I was like, no, I'm happy with what I chose. So my sister also was a post engineer, so again, family pressure. So with my grades, I did not get option to choose computers at all. I had other options, but not computers. I used to talk about civil engineering, and when her friends used to come for combined study, she used to talk about artificial intelligence, and she used to talk about all these, cool computer language and programs and stuffs. And, the AI stuck my heart and mind so much, because when I started doing some, research about AI, I was like, wow, artificial intelligence has so much capabilities, we can do cool stuffs.
What year was this? You first got in touch with artificial intelligence and started thinking about it?
1996.
Okay, so this was just like AI was just a pipe dream.
Growing,
yeah.
So somehow because of that AI term, I got interested in computers, and I told my parents, like, I want to do some computer course. And it was funny, like we hardly had, like when I was in 9th grade, we had computer as a subject. It was a big lab. Okay. 1 computer, 6 kids, and then 30 minutes class, you have 1 computer, 6 kids. What are you teaching? What are you learning? Press one button, other person will press some other button. And I was like, I did not learn anything in school. So I decided to take the computer course. And when I started doing the course, or the founder of the company, I would say, he found some skills, some unique skills in me. Like I'm able to quickly grasp the concept, and I'm able to, explain people how to solve that. So he asked me, I was 16, and he asked me, would you be willing to teach? And I was like, of course, why not? Like earning while learning is a good thing at 16.
Yeah.
To, have some pocket money, why not? So then I started balancing and managing my, work around 7 to 10. I used to actually teach in the institute. Then I used to go to my college, do my, engineering work. Evening, I used to come back around 5 o'clock for my course, the continuation of my computer course, which I was doing. So my whole day was busy, and I used to keep myself busy learning new things. And that's when he saw that, I've all of the concept, he introduced web designing to me. He sent me to the cyber cafe for a week just to go through how the websites work and all. And I got so fascinated just looking at, how the websites are and all of those things. And then I went back and I told my mom, I want to do web designing. I want to do web designing course. And I told her, I had to convince my parents why you should, invest in my education more, outside of the engineering. And they were pretty open, because they started seeing the value when I was telling them. And I was like, this one has more potential. We can do a lot more things. So they kind of bought me a computer, and, they enrolled me into a web designing course. And then I came back and I was doing all sorts of web designing. I started doing a lot of research and all of those things. And to the point that I started getting freelancing gigs, and I was like, started doing that as well.
And you started doing website design and development, and then you did SEO. I'm just going through LinkedIn here. You started, so Josh and I, to this day, we run, like I said, a marketing agency, and SEO, web development are two of the things that we do. Obviously, since the early 2000s, SEO has changed drastically, the way that we approach that today. And then I'm going to jump ahead again for the sake of time. So you then transitioned some of these freelancing roles and some of this development and SEO roles into a role at AOL. For those young listeners, that's America Online. It used to be a big deal. Oh man, I still remember my first AOL email address that I ever had. So AOL, and that was in India still, right? And then you continued on, and then you worked for Amazon. You had a couple other jobs. Then you worked for Amazon in India, transitioned to Amazon in Seattle. We're going to skip a few. You wrote some books. You kind of kept going. You're a hustler. You could tell. You started your own couple of different things. You've got the Digital Assistant Academy now, and you're, again, the product owner for the Digital Assistant program at Ford. So talk about just a kind of a rocket ship career, it seems like, going. And again, you can hear in your story just from the beginning, I can hear, and I mean this in the most positive way, you're stubborn, right? In the sense that you know what you want, and you are going to make sure that you get what you want, whether it's the, sitting with your arms folded and your legs crossed and telling your husband, I'm not going to tell you to sit down. You sit down if you want to sit down, right? But you knew what you wanted. And then it sounds like you, early on in your education, you said, look, civil engineer might be the bottom of the engineers, but I don't care. This is what makes sense to me. This is what I want. I'm going to pursue my own career. I'm going to pursue the opportunities that I see. It sounds to me like just a story of hard work. Like I said, stubbornness in the best possible sense, just knowing who you are and what you want, and then putting in the work. And maybe, as we say on the podcast a lot, kind of getting in over your head, ready to figure it out in order to take advantage of opportunities. The two things that you're working on mainly now, I think there's the third, which is the Women in Voice. You're very actively enrolled as a thought leader in this voice technology, right? Like in this whole industry. It is an amazing industry right now that's so, I mean, the Internet of Things, right? The Google Homes and the Alexas and the cars. I mean, it's crazy to think now when I'm in my car, I don't even, and I drive a Chevy, sorry, it's not a Ford, but when I'm driving my truck, I don't even think about it anymore. I just respond to my car with a text message. It's with the Apple Play. It's like, what do you want to say? And I'm like, well, just tell them this. And my car does it for me. It's obviously it's not really my car, but you've seen this industry change drastically. What is the state of the industry today? And knowing what you know, working at a large company in the US as on top of this, I mean, what do you see as the future for this? What do you see the direction of that industry?
So in order to answer that question, I'll have to go a little, in 2011, right? 2011 Siri was launched. 2012 is when my journey with voice started.
One thing real quick. Can you end a debate for me that is not really a debate? Can you just agree with me that Google Voice is way better than Siri from a technology standpoint?
Yeah.
Why is that?
So I'll tell you the reason as well. It's the strategy, how strategically you work. So there's one thing. One thing is that I want to be the first in the industry. I want to be the leader versus I want to be the follower. If you want you'll make mistakes, because you are just trying to focus on being the first one. And
so that's Siri. That's what you're referring to as
and
Apple.
That's what Siri did. Yeah. Right. But then if you look at Google did not, Google Now was there, but then Google Home was not there. So Google took longer, I would say, to, get into the industry. It waited till Amazon launched Alexa. And then after that, it was like, okay, now it's turn, because by then it realized, what people are liking, the viability of the voice assistant and the technology. And it also looked into, things which are not working or technology which is not working for people and all of those things. And then, came up with the best version of their assistant.
I switched from a Google, a Nexus to the iPhone, and I was so spoiled with the Google Assistant because I would ask it anything and it would do it. And now, I'm telling you, even to this day, Siri is terrible. It always just says, oh, you'll have to search for that or whatever. Is that something? And again, now I'm just asking it because I'm curious on your expertise here. Is that something that Apple's going to get better at? I mean, is that something they go in and just continue to update the AI or the algorithms or whatever it is that they've got, this code? Is that something that's going to improve over time, or do they have to overhaul the whole thing, or can they continue to make it better with time?
See, it's a strategic thing, I would say, right? How do you want the assistant to be? So technology wise, they are improving, when it comes to the speech recognition, when it comes to the text to speech, it's more human and it's more natural now, it doesn't feel as robotic. So from that standpoint, but then some of the things, like when you ask for a question, should I show something on the screen versus should I refer to a link, speak it out loud to you? All of those things is a strategic question which company needs to think about, holistically, like how they want it. For example, when Amazon launched Alexa, they promoted saying hands-free, eyes-free, because what they were trying to prove is, you don't need a phone because Siri was already there, and they wanted to do something different when they are coming into the market. That's why they were like, you don't even need a screen or something. You can just use voice and you can be done with it. But then soon what happened, this became so successful. Voice is so natural way for us to speak that, if given a choice, we would do that. My 2 years, when my son was 2, he hardly knew how to speak. He hardly knew any words, but he was able to recognize the microphone action, the icon, and then he just pressed it and he was like, ninja something. And, it recognized like he's asking ninja cartoons and stuff. So that's how, our mental model is. That is why, all of a sudden speech became so successful and, everyone wanted to do more things with voice. And Amazon realized some complex use cases which we never thought about have to be now thought about. And they now designed Echo Show with the screen, had all of the things where, now you don't need a phone, but we still need to show you something on the screen. And then the whole concept of multimodality came.
You answered a debate for me with a lot of people out there. that don't agree with the Siri versus Google Assistant debate. And I do agree. It depends on what the goal is, what the end goal is, right? And they all obviously serve kind of different purposes. What do you see as the future? There's an interesting skepticism, or I guess you could even call it a bit of a fear with AI, and specifically as it pertains to voice. I mean, obviously you're working on all of the ambitious and optimistic sides of it, but it's funny, in pop culture and whatever, you see a lot of these negative, and Elon Musk has even said stuff, eventually AI is going to take over and it's going to get smarter and be able to communicate better. What does the next 10 years look like? Maybe the next 20 years look like as this AI, specifically as it pertains to your expertise in voice recognition and voice technologies. What does that look like?
It's going to evolve drastically and significantly, given that, the expectations are also growing in parallel. So we have to keep it up with the user expectations. So down the line of, 10 to 20 years, everything will be connected. Who would have thought that with the voice command, they would control their house, or they would set up routines saying like, okay, turn on the blinds or off the blinds and lights, and turn on my coffee maker and all of those things. And thanks to skills and technologies, they are capable of doing that thing right now, right? So down the line of 10, 15 years, there will be a seamless handoff. Let's say you are listening to music at your house, you'll be able to, when you jump into your car, the music continues. When you are in a meeting, let's say I do that all the time, right? I have a 1 hour commute. So I start early, but I have like 8 a.m. meetings as well. So I take some of the meetings in the car. And sometimes what happens is, I reach office and I'm midway into my meeting. And now I have to switch to some other modality manually. All of those transitions will happen so seamlessly because everything is interconnected. Everything is linked to each other. We have no issues as a user linking our music, payment system and everything to Alexa. So we are already, getting used to that mind shift change. From the AI standpoint, yes, these connectivities will help us, very seamlessly because you don't know who you are talking to, but you are getting things done, right? From all of the standpoints. Gesture recognition technology or eye-gazing technologies, they will evolve. So it will evolve to the extent, where you're not just using voice, but you're using a combination of things. So I see, the future for AI is really big and, huge.
So I was talking to a founder of a startup in Silicon Valley a couple weeks ago for an AR company, an augmented reality company that's figuring out different ways to connect this augmented reality technology to more like business to business or business to consumer products and goods and gaming and all of these different things, right? And one of the things that he said was that we've had a lot of the technology ready to go for a long time, but just the fact is that the bandwidth of, 4G or LTE or whatever, even though it's insanely fast, it just wasn't caught up yet. Do you see this transition with like 5G coming out and this, supposedly, that's 10 times faster than even LTE, which is kind of unfathomable for me considering how fast, sometimes Verizon is. Is that the case that you see with kind of AI? Do you see that as 5G becomes more and bandwidth speeds, become faster and faster and faster, that's just going to open the floodgates for a lot of technology that's been waiting to come out, that's going to be a lot more accessible?
Definitely, yeah. Who would have thought, we come from a world, I don't know about you, but I come from a world of bandwidth, the dial-up connections.
Mm-hmm, yep.
Right?
I just pulled up that sound the other day. We were talking about it with some friends and I put on YouTube, I said dial-up connection sound or something. And I played it for everybody just for a good flashback of the sound of the dial-up connecting.
Yeah. Then it used to take almost 20-30 minutes just to connect to the internet. And then, being able to stay connected and do things. And only websites were there. We were not even, close to having smartphones or smart apps or anything at that point. And soon the technology changed, right? Within 10 years, if you look at 1996 or 1997 to 2007, there were smartphones. If you look now, there's voice. So technology keeps evolving. So as the dial-up connections or as the other technologies are evolving, AI will also get more flexibility. AI has the power. It needs data. It needs, the right kind of algorithms and training the system and model and all of those kind of things to do what it is supposed to do. So I feel like with these things will be the enablers. For example, if you look at any car below 2005, they are all embedded voice assistants in the car because, there was no connectivity. But now if you look at any modern cars, they all have connectivity. And, there's internet, there's ways you can connect, you can stay connected to the extent where, these voice assistants can reside in a hybrid model, voice, like in the car and also in the cloud. Everything is so connected nowadays, and the moment we will be able to have connectivity and everything is in the cloud, the integration or communication or handoff and things like that will become much more easier for everyone. So I feel like definitely there's a lot more potential that way.
What do you see in your job now at Ford? I mean, can you give us any scoop or any insight into some of the technologies that people can start looking forward to and in, the 2021s and 22s and 23s and some of the, as Ford continues to release new models and increase their technology?
I work on the autonomous side. So of course, it's fascinating. You would start seeing self-driving cars, cars driving by itself with no steering wheels for sure. That is the future.
How far away is Ford? You've got, the real industry leader on that is Tesla at this point, right? With an actual car that has autopilot that, for better, for worse. But what does that look like for Ford? An older company that's, I'm guessing it's been a little bit harder to innovate because it's an older company that's having to find ways. It's not a disruptive startup, right? Like Tesla came in. How far is Ford away from having a self-driving vehicle that's actually on the road as an autonomous vehicle?
We do have some self-driving vehicles already in Miami, and we've been doing active testing. So see, the company may be old, but the talent is not, I would say, and Ford has the best talent and best people I have ever worked with, for sure. Very passionate and very dedicated and, with the automotive experience, what Ford brings in. And we follow a very design-centered or human-centered kind of design philosophy where, we test everything with the end users. So I would say like we are very actively working on these things. I cannot talk a lot about this, of course.
Oh, come on. Tell us everything.
Yes. We do have test vehicles running, and then we are actively working on our, first launch in the coming years. So,
okay. Well, as I hear things, I'll email you now that I have your information and I'll say, hey, I heard this. Is this real? Is this happening? It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you. My favorite thing about doing the show is getting to meet amazing people and hearing their stories. It's fascinating for Josh and I, and we learn so much. So thanks so much for contributing and helping us and teaching us and sharing your story with us. I think it's powerful and impactful. And right now, I know you've got a couple of different things you're working on. And where is the best place for people to hear more about what you're doing, what you're working on, and connect with you if they're interested?
So I'm very active on LinkedIn and Twitter. So if anyone wants to connect with me, they can just search for my name, Shyamala Prayaga, on LinkedIn.
And in the show notes, we'll have links to all of your different social channels.
Yeah. And then Twitter, it is S Prayaga. So, people can follow me there.
Cool. Well, it's a pleasure. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to continuing to stay in touch and following everything that you're working on. If there's anything we can ever do with any of the stuff you're working on, just please reach out and let us know. We'd love to help out in any way we can.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It was talking to you. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I to the memory lane.
Good. That's what we want. Thanks, Shyamala.
Thanks so much. It's great to meet you, Shyamala.
Same here, Josh. Bye-bye.
Hello, it's Corey here, and I just want to thank you so much for listening into the Hope Strategy Podcast. I hope you're enjoying it as much as we are enjoying having these amazing conversations with these incredible individuals talking about hope. We'd love it if you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, and leaving us a review on iTunes or Spotify or anywhere that you listen to your podcasts, and share it with anybody you feel that can benefit from these messages of hope. Thank you so much for listening to the Hope Strategy Podcast.